I woke up in a hospital bed on my wedding night, dizzy, humiliated, and drugged. The culprit? My mother-in-law, who spiked my drink knowing I was on medication. Days later, she tried to fix it with a $5,000 check. You won't believe what I did next. The ceiling was white, with that sterile texture you only ever notice in hospital rooms. Too clean, too flat, too still. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly, and the antiseptic smell clawed at my throat. I blinked slowly, trying to make sense of the shadows on the wall, until the shape beside my bed shifted. Jake. He was slumped in the visitor chair, suit jacket off, tie loose, holding a half-empty bottle of water like it might break. My first thought was, is the wedding over? I tried to speak, but my mouth felt like it had been stuffed with cotton. Jake sat up fast, relief flooding his face. You're awake, thank God. His voice cracked. There was a moment, half a breath, before it hit me. The ceremony, the toast, the glass in my hand, my mother-in-law's tight smile. I tried to sit up and felt the IV pull. A nurse appeared, silent and efficient, checked my vitals, told me I'd fainted at the reception. Likely a reaction, she said. Alcohol and medication don't mix well. She didn't say more. She didn't need to. My stomach turned cold. The night snapped back in flashes. The way Linda, Jake's mother, had insisted, just one sip, sweetie. It's your wedding day. What's a toast without champagne? The way I'd hesitated. My Lexapro in the purse by the makeup chair. The way Jake had smiled, distracted, arm around his uncle, not hearing me say no, and the dizzy lurch, the noise folding in, the floor rushing up. I closed my eyes. 2 days later, I was home. The house was filled with white roses and half-wilted lilies. Cards stood on the kitchen island, all the usual lines. Feel better soon. What a scare. Congratulations anyway. I moved through it like a ghost. Jake was kind, if distant. He checked on me, made tea, left early for work. We didn't talk about that night, not really. Not about how the wedding had ended early, or how the guests were ushered out while I lay unconscious. Not about how Linda had smiled too quickly and said, she probably skipped lunch. Stress does that. And definitely not about the envelope she left on our counter 3 days later. It was a cream-colored envelope, thick, heavy. My name written on the front in cursive that looked practiced. I didn't open it at first, just stared at it while the kettle boiled, then again while it cooled. I opened it after dark. Inside was a check, $5,000, a note scribbled in the corner. You know I meant no harm. Let's just move on. Love, Linda. It was the second betrayal. I didn't say a word to Jake that night. I didn't ask if he knew, if he'd seen the envelope. I sat at the kitchen table long after the lights were off, holding that check like it might answer something. Like maybe if I stared long enough, it would rewrite the night, undo the sting in my mouth, the way my knees buckled, the voices that grew too far away. Linda hadn't visited me in the hospital. She hadn't called, but she had sent money. The next morning, I made toast I didn't eat. I placed the check in the center of the table, and then I tore it in half. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, holding the two pieces like they were evidence in a case I hadn't yet decided how to prosecute. When Jake came into the kitchen, hair still wet from the shower, I didn't tell him what I'd done. He looked at me, tired, like he'd aged 10 years in the past week, and I realized he wasn't going to ask. Maybe because he knew. Maybe because not knowing was easier. The silence between us was the loudest thing in the room. He kissed the top of my head and left. I watched the door close behind him, and for the first time in days I felt something close to clarity. This wasn't over. The thing no one tells you about betrayal is that it doesn't shout. It whispers, slips in during the quiet moments, like when you're folding your dress back into the garment bag and realize you don't even remember wearing it. Or when you hear your husband laughing on the phone with his mother 2 days after she almost put you in the ER. I watched Jake through the hallway mirror that morning. He stood by the window, coffee in hand, chuckling at something she said. When he noticed me, he muted the call, smiled like nothing was cracked beneath the surface. Hey, you okay? I nodded. Lie number 1 of the day. He went back to his conversation. I went back to pretending the rug hadn't just shifted under my feet. Later that afternoon, Linda called me directly. First time since the wedding. Her voice was bright, sharp-edged. Darling, I just wanted to check in. You gave us quite the scare. I didn't respond. She filled the silence effortlessly. I really thought one sip wouldn't hurt. You looked so lovely, so radiant. I just wanted a proper toast. She said it like she was commenting on the weather. Like what she did was a harmless tradition, not a deliberate crossing of a line she knew existed. I'd told her, twice. The week before the wedding and again that morning in the dressing room. No alcohol. I'm on medication. Her response then had been a tight smile and, "It's just one moment, dear." Now her voice softened. "Let's not dwell on the past, okay? These things happen. I'm sure you understand." That's when I realized. She truly believed she had done nothing wrong. She didn't spike my drink out of malice. She did it out of entitlement. Out of the belief that her idea of a celebration outweighed my medical boundaries. She wasn't sorry. She was inconvenienced. When I didn't respond, she added, "I left something for you at the house. I hope it helps smooth things over. Let's move forward, That word, smooth, like this was a wrinkle in a dress, not a violation of trust. I ended the call without saying goodbye. That night, I asked Jake a simple question. "Did you know your mom gave me that champagne?" He hesitated. That was enough. I didn't need him to lie. I didn't even need a full confession. The pause was the confession. He said, "She thought it would calm your nerves." Everyone was tense. I stared at him. "You let her do it?" I said quietly. He looked guilty, then defensive. "It was just one glass. You'd barely taken a sip." And then I collapsed. "She didn't mean for that to happen." "But it did." Silence again. I went upstairs, took off my wedding band and left it on the nightstand. Not out of dramatics. Not yet. Just because it felt too heavy. I didn't know then if I would ever put it back on. 3 weeks after the wedding, I still hadn't told anyone what really happened. The official version was stress and exhaustion. Convenient, unthreatening. The kind of thing people nod at and move on from. But the truth sat in my chest like wet cement. I started sleeping in the guest room. Told Jake it was because I wasn't feeling well. Which wasn't a lie, just not the whole picture. At night, I'd stare at the ceiling and play the scene in my head on loop. Linda raising her glass. The smile she gave me when I hesitated. The champagne catching the light like a warning I didn't see in time. On the 4th week, Jake suggested we visit his parents for dinner. "They want to see how you're doing," he said. I looked at him. "Do they?" He flinched. "It's just dinner." I said no. He didn't ask again. The next morning, I found him in the kitchen staring at his phone. He quickly turned it face down when I walked in. I didn't ask. I was tired of asking. Tired of wondering if his loyalty had already shifted back to the woman who nearly hospitalized me. Later that day, the envelope came. Another one. Same cream stationery. Same handwriting. This time, no check. Just a handwritten note. "Let's not let one misunderstanding ruin our relationship. Jake needs peace. We all do. You're part of this family now. Act like it." That last line, underlined. I read it 3 times. Act like it. I folded the note neatly and set it in the drawer next to the first check, now ripped in half and shoved beneath an old set of dish towels. I didn't know why I kept it. Maybe to remind myself I wasn't crazy. That this happened. That this was real. That night, Jake found me in the living room folding laundry. He hovered near the edge of the couch. "She just wants to fix things," he said, not looking at me. "She wants to bury it." He didn't respond. Just stood there with that look, torn between 2 worlds and unwilling to fully commit to either. "You know what scares me the most?" I asked, folding the last towel. "That you're okay with it." He sat down beside me. "I'm not, but I can't change what happened." "No, but you could choose a side." The silence between us stretched, taut and fraying. He finally whispered, "Don't make me pick between you and my mother." And there it was, the 3rd betrayal. I started noticing things. Small things at first. How Jake would pause before unlocking his phone when I walked into the room. How his tone softened when he spoke to Linda, even his mind grew sharp with restraint. How every conversation seemed to orbit around her peace, her comfort, her version of what had happened. My peace didn't seem to factor in. One night I found him in the office with the door half closed, whispering. I didn't mean to eavesdrop. It just happened, the way proximity sometimes does. His voice was low, almost pleading. "She's not over it. Just give her space." "No, I haven't brought up the money again." I said I wouldn't. Money. So he had known about the check. I went back to the guest room without confronting him. Not out of fear, out of calculation. There was nothing he could say that would make the truth easier to swallow. A few days later, I received a package. No note. Just a slim white box wrapped in gold ribbon. Inside, a delicate gold bracelet. Simple. Expensive. A gift that looked like apology but spoke like hush money. I stared at it for a long time. Then I texted Jake. "Did your mom send this?" 3 dots appeared, disappeared, reappeared. "She's trying, okay?" She thought maybe a gesture would help. I didn't reply. Instead, I put the bracelet back in the box, walked downstairs, and dropped it into the trash. That night, Jake finally brought it up. "You threw it out. She drugged me," I said flatly. "And you're upset about jewelry." He looked away. "She didn't drug you. It was a misunderstanding." I laughed, but it didn't sound like laughter. "You think me saying no and her doing it anyway is a misunderstanding?" He had no answer. He just rubbed the back of his neck like he was the one in pain. I stood up. "You want this to blow over. You want me to swallow it down so your mother doesn't feel uncomfortable, so you don't have to choose." He met my eyes. Finally. "I don't want to lose either of you. You already have," I said. Then I left the room, the sound of the bracelet box thudding into the trash still echoing in my head. The day I told my therapist what happened, she didn't blink. She just leaned forward slightly and asked, "And what did that moment teach you about safety?" I stared at the floor, the cheap beige rug beneath the coffee table. "That I don't have any," I said. She nodded, but it wasn't approval. It was confirmation, like she'd been waiting for me to say it out loud. That night, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror with the remnants of my wedding makeup still buried in the corners of the drawer. Lipstick, setting spray, the glittery eyeshadow I'd only ever worn once. I hadn't touched them since. I packed them into a plastic bag and dropped them into the bathroom trash. It felt oddly ceremonial, like I was burying someone I used to be, someone who still believed that kindness could override control. Jake noticed the bag. "You're throwing that out? It's barely used." "So was our honeymoon," I said without thinking. His jaw tightened. "You're still punishing me." "I'm still recovering," I corrected. "Big difference." He didn't answer, just walked away, again. That weekend we attended his cousin's baby shower. I hadn't wanted to go. I told Jake that. But he said it was important, that people were starting to notice my absence. like I was an accessory that had gone missing from his arm. I wore a dress I didn't feel comfortable in and a smile I'd rehearsed in the car. Linda greeted me at the door with the same performative warmth she'd mastered years ago. Her hands were cold. Her hug was quick. "I'm so glad you came," she said, then added quietly, "You look well." I was worried. I gave her nothing. Inside, the house buzzed with pastel decorations and women comparing registries. I stood near the kitchen island, sipping soda from a plastic cup. Someone mentioned mimosas. Linda offered to make them. I felt her glance at me, meant to be subtle, like a flick of a match head. I set my drink down and left the room. Jake found me outside, standing on the back deck, arms wrapped around myself though the air was warm. "You okay?" I didn't answer. He stepped closer. "We can leave if you want." I turned to him. "Why are you still protecting her?" His expression shifted, the way it does when someone realizes they're out of excuses. "She didn't mean to hurt you." But she did. He didn't argue. Maybe for the first time he understood that intentions don't erase damage. Back at home, I went to the drawer in the kitchen, pulled out the check, still torn, and folded it again, tighter this time. Then I reached for the envelope it came in. On the front, the cursive letters of my name were still intact. I picked up a pen and wrote underneath, "You don't get to define forgiveness." And for the first time since the wedding, I felt my hands stop shaking. The first time I felt like a guest in my own home was a Tuesday. Jake had invited Linda over without telling me. I came downstairs to find her standing at the stove, stirring something in my Dutch oven like she belonged there. She wore an apron she must have brought from home, and she greeted me like this was perfectly normal. "Oh good, you're up. I thought I'd make chicken marsala. Your husband says you haven't been eating properly." Your husband, not Jake, not my son. A quiet dig, wrapped in concern. I didn't answer, just walked past her, poured a glass of water, and stared out the window while she cooked. Jake came home an hour later, all bright eyes and false ease. "Smells amazing in here, huh?" I didn't respond. Linda smiled and said, "We all need a little comfort now and then." After dinner, she cleared the dishes without asking and hummed while she loaded the dishwasher. I stood in the hallway, watching her hands touch every surface of my life. When she finally left, Jake looked relieved. "That wasn't so bad, right?" he said, rubbing my back like I was a child who'd survived a dentist appointment. I turned to him. "She's testing how much she can get away with," he sighed. "You always assume the worst." "No," I said. "I've just stopped pretending the best." That night, I dreamt I was back in the hospital. Same white ceiling, same hum of machines. Only this time, I was alone. Jake never showed up. Linda stood at the foot of the bed holding a glass of champagne, smiling. I woke up drenched in sweat. The next morning, I emailed a divorce attorney. I didn't send it, just saved it to drafts. But it was there. Later that day, I came home to find a new set of champagne flutes on the kitchen counter. "A belated gift," the note said, in Linda's handwriting. I stared at them for a long time. Crystal, elegant, mocking. Jake walked in and froze when he saw my face. "I didn't know she was sending those," he said. "Why didn't you stop her? I can't control everything she does." "No," I said. "But you could have chosen not to be her delivery system." He looked at the box like it might detonate. "I'll get rid of them," he said. "You already didn't." I left the room. The flutes were gone the next morning. So was something in me. The first time I imagined life without Jake, it didn't come with panic. It came with silence. A clean, still kind, like the hush after a thunderstorm when the world hasn't decided yet whether to breathe again. I was sitting on the edge of the bathtub, a towel still wrapped around my hair, watching steam roll off the mirror. I didn't feel angry anymore. Just done. The kind of done that doesn't announce itself. It just settles in, like furniture rearranged overnight. That night, Jake asked if I wanted to visit his aunt next weekend. A family barbecue. "Everyone's going to be there," he said, almost hopeful. "It could be good for us." I looked up from my tea. "Your mom too?" He hesitated. "It's her sister." I didn't even bother answering. "You can't avoid her forever," he added. I sipped my tea. "Watch me." Jake stood there for a while like he wanted to push back but wasn't sure if he had the footing. Eventually, he left the room. Later, I pulled out the wedding photo album Linda had made for us. I hadn't looked at it since it arrived in the mail, sealed with a gold ribbon and a note in her signature script. A day to remember. The photos were beautiful. Curated, deceptive. None of the ones from the reception made it in. No shots after the toast. No mention of the ambulance. Just flowers and soft lighting and smiles that didn't reach the eyes. On the last page, there was a picture of me and Linda. She had her arm looped through mine, a toast in the other hand. I stared at my own face. I looked dazed, tired. I hadn't noticed it before. I closed the book and slid it onto the shelf. Spine out, truth in. The next morning, I left Jake a note. Not a dramatic one. Just 5 words written carefully on a sticky pad. "I need space. Be gone." Then I packed a bag, took my laptop, booked a cheap Airbnb 2 towns over and left while he was still in the shower. No screaming, no breakdown, just distance. Finally. When he called, I let it ring. When he texted, I didn't open it. I was reclaiming silence. And silence, for the first time in months, felt like control. The Airbnb was small, a studio with creaky floors and thrift store furniture, but the sheets were clean, and the silence was mine. That first night, I slept without waking up at 3 a.m. with my heart racing. No nightmares, No Linda in the shadows, just the hum of the fridge and the ache of relief. Jake texted again the next morning. Please talk to me. I'm sorry. I didn't know how bad it was. I didn't answer. Not because I wanted to punish him, but because I didn't trust that apology. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I walked into town around noon, ordered a sandwich, and sat by the lake. There were ducks paddling through algae and an old couple arguing over whether to get a second scoop of ice cream. Real life. Ordinary. Distant from the slow implosion I'd just left behind. When I got back to the Airbnb, there was a package at the door. No return address. Just my name, written in that same practice cursive. I brought it inside, opened it carefully. Inside was a letter and another check. This time, $10,000. The letter read, I hope this shows you how much I regret what happened. Money can't change the past, but maybe it can give you peace. I just want us to move on. Please don't destroy this one. My hands shook as I folded the letter. Not from rage, from the brutal clarity of it. She still thought this was about money. She didn't want forgiveness. She wanted closure, on her terms. I sat on the floor with that check between my knees. The number stared back at me. Zeros lined up like bargaining chips. Then I pulled out my phone and finally texted Jake. Your mother sent another check. Double the first. She still thinks silence can be bought. That should tell you everything. He replied almost instantly. I didn't know, I swear. I'll make her stop. I didn't write back. Instead, I took a match from the fireplace box, lit the check, and watched it curl into black and ash in the kitchen sink. No drama, no speech, just fire, just decision. Then I opened my laptop and began searching for apartments. Not temporary ones, not getaways. Home. A week passed. I didn't go back. Jake showed up at the Airbnb on a Wednesday. I heard the knock, peeked through the blinds, and didn't move. He knocked again, softer this time, then slid something under the door. I waited 10 minutes before picking it up. It was a photo. Our wedding day. One I hadn't seen. We were dancing. My eyes closed, his mouth near my ear. We looked like we belonged to each other, like something hadn't already started to rot beneath the surface. On the back, he'd written, If you want out, I won't stop you, but I'll spend the rest of my life wishing I'd protected you sooner. There was no manipulation in that, no bargaining, just a sentence heavy with regret. I left the photo on the table and went for a walk. That night I sat with a notebook, the one I used to write in when I still believed marriage was sacred and effort was enough. I made 2 lists, one for what I'd be losing, one for what I might finally gain. The second list was longer. That should have made the decision easier. It didn't, because loss, even when necessary, still hurts. The next morning Jake texted again. This time, she won't come near you again, I told her. It's done. But it wasn't. Not really. Not until I decided it was. I called him. His voice cracked when he said hello. I'm not coming back, I said. Not yet. Maybe not at all. Silence. Then, I understand. I need to be in a place where my boundaries don't get negotiated behind my back. He swallowed audibly. I thought I could keep the peace. I didn't realize I was just picking a side and pretending not to. I let that sit. Then I said, You can love your mother, but you can't keep asking me to swallow the parts of her that poison me. I know, he said. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just breathed. After the call, I took the photo he left and slid it into the back of my notebook, not as a keepsake, as a lesson. Love without protection isn't safety, it's proximity. And I was done mistaking one for the other. The apartment I chose was small, 1 bedroom, 2nd floor, with chipped baseboards and a view of a hardware store parking lot. But the windows let in good light, and for the first time in months, I could breathe without bracing for someone else's reaction. I moved in on a Sunday. No fanfare, just cardboard boxes, takeout containers, and the quiet clink of kitchenware being shelved in unfamiliar cupboards. I didn't invite Jake. I didn't tell Linda. I didn't tell anyone. The silence was mine. That night, I sat on the floor with my back against the wall, eating cold lo mein from the container and scrolling through my old wedding photos. I wasn't trying to hurt myself. I was testing the pain, seeing how deep it still went. It didn't knock the air out of me like it used to. A few days later, Jake sent one last message. I won't reach out again. I want you to be okay. I just hope someday you'll believe I finally meant it. I stared at the text, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Then I locked my phone and slid it into a drawer. Forgiveness is not a performance. It's not a check in the mail or a man learning the truth 5 months too late. It's a door you keep locked, not out of anger, but to protect what little you've rebuilt. I didn't hate Jake. I wasn't even sure I stopped loving him. But I finally loved myself more than I loved the potential of what we were supposed to be. Linda never apologized. Not really. Because people like her don't apologize. They manage. They spin. They buy forgiveness like it's a service with a return policy. But some things don't unbreak. The wedding wasn't the beginning I thought it was. It was a rupture disguised as a vow. And in the space that rupture left behind, I found something steadier than any promise. Self-respect. I still keep the torn checks, tucked in an envelope at the back of my closet. Not as trophies, as proof. Proof that survival sometimes looks like walking away quietly. That boundaries whispered are still boundaries. That silence can scream louder than any confrontation. And that sometimes the truest love story is the one where you choose yourself.